Hi, it's Catherine Morgan. I'm the founder of Point A to Point B Transitions. I'm a career transition expert and business consultant to consultants. And this is Evolving Working with my fabulous co-host, Susan Eckstein.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm really excited to be with you again today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Susan Eckstein. I'm a women's empowerment expert. I'm a workshop facilitator, keynote speaker, and a certified coach. And in a nutshell, I help high-achieving men and women own their personal power so they can stop shrinking and have the confidence to be seen, be heard, and take up space.
And today, our guest is my friend, Kristeen Barth. I met Kristeen when she was co-facilitating a 12-week leadership training course with my dear friend Carolyn and 10 Women Strong, and we've stayed in contact after that. And one of the things I am very committed and why I started the Evolving Working podcast is to talk about how we can have a better and healthier relationship with working, because the way we're working isn't working for a lot of people. Consequently, the Great Resignation and the Great Reshuffling. So Kristeen, welcome. Tell us a little bit about your background and the type of coaching you're doing.
Yeah, my background. So I started my career in IT, worked with technology teams, leading product teams, and at one point realized I wanted to spend more focus on people instead of systems. So moved into coaching, actually went that way on my own, had decided to do extracurricular work to get trained in coaching, and then slowly navigated my way into leadership development within my organization. So found my way into HR, and that's been super fulfilling to spend time in that space. And I have a coaching business as well, where I support leaders looking to build a healthier relationship with work. So we really focus on finding a job that gives you life versus feeling like it takes your life away, and it's you find yourself resenting the work. And then once you get that wonderful job, whether you create it internally, you look for something that exists internally, or you're going externally, helping leaders not fall back into their old ways, right? So you're the same person, you're just in a new environment, super helpful, but how do you not drop back into those old habits of, hyperachievement, pleasing, all the things.
Overworking, no boundaries.
Yeah. So love to support leaders in that space and love to spend time in the employee engagement and employee experience area.
Well, clearly a lot of work needs to be done on that. What was the last survey I saw? Was 76% of people are not engaged in the work. I think it's actually higher.
Yeah, it's wild. And there's so much we can do as individuals. I think we have more power than we even realize, right? The last couple episodes I watched spoke to that as well. Just how much power an individual does have to create change for themselves and to ask for what they want and make something that works for them.
Excellent. Susan, what would you love to ask Kristeen?
I have a lot of questions, but
you got since this morning.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that just comes to mind to sort of open up the discussion is, now it's been a few years in the pandemic. A lot of people's working arrangements have changed, where they used to be going into the office and now they're working from home full time. And I know for me, for the most part, I have worked, I do my own thing. So I've been able to sort of set my own hours. But one of the things that I have noticed, and I've spoken to several other people about, is, we think that when we're working from home, we give ourselves a cutoff time, we shut everything down, we get everything organized for the next day. And then all of a sudden it'll be like 7 o'clock after dinner and you find yourself opening up your email, and then you're pulled back to your desk. And there don't seem to be some of the concrete boundaries that existed before. And people then always feel like they have to be on and responsive. And I'm just curious, from your point of view and the kind of work that you do, how can we start to build back in those boundaries, like you said earlier, where we're in control, we have the power to show up in a certain way, but because everything seems to be somewhat fluid still, that a lot of people are struggling with that.
Yeah, I do a lot of work around saboteurs and sort of what are the inner critics, what are the driving, narratives that feed into that. So if, overwork comes from fear of not achieving something, right? So we dig into what is a hyperachiever, and some of the antidotes to that are, building up your own sense of self-worth, right? So we talk through a lot of that. I've also noticed a lot of pleasers in the work that I'm doing. So I'm looking to take care of everyone else, and I don't take care of myself, or I'm always last. And oftentimes with pleasers, what's unique about them too is no one really asked them to do that thing. They just set out and did it. And so they don't get the credit that they want, or the appreciation, right, that they want for the work that they're doing. And so looking to understand that and then unwind those and build up muscles around self-empathy, around curiosity, just having a more clear mind. So in practical terms then, Susan, if somebody came to me and said, I'm not logging off before 7 or 8 o'clock, or I'm skipping dinners, or I'm, it's very easy at home to eat at my desk, right? And just, so then, okay, what is it that you want? Where is that coming from? What's the fear? Oftentimes there's a fear behind that. What's that fear?
I'm gonna get fired. If I don't do it, I'm gonna get fired.
Everybody else is on. I want to get promoted. And so how do I get promoted? Well, I'm looking at everybody else that I work with who's, emailing at night, who's eating on Zoom, who's doing all these things. And so I subscribe to that too, thinking that's going to get me ahead, right? Also looking at what is it that really makes you happy, right? Is that promotion? Is that recognition externally the thing that's going to make you happy, or do you need to build that within yourself, right? And build up that.
That's a big one. Not enoughness, striving, pushing, posturing, pleasing, because you personally don't feel like you're enough. You two are certified coaches. I'm not. I just play one on TV. But that is a big driver of a lot of the problems. What I see with my clients, some of it is a toxic work environment and a lot of things that are hard to fight against, but some of them are self-inflicted. Especially with entrepreneurs. They're all upset that they're not going to be able to hit this deadline or do this thing, and I'm like, well, who set the deadline? I mean, who's waiting for this thing? Well, I'm doing this right now. My book's got to be out in October, end of October, and we'll miss the window of opportunity. I'll shut on my fingers. And guess what? No, it's fine. When it goes out, it'll go out.
Right.
But we don't know that because it's our narrative. So it sounds like what you do is you go in and help people identify the stories they're telling themselves and identify, are they true or not? And is there a different story I can tell?
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's sort of all made up anyway. So why not make up something that's going to serve you too? Right. And I think a lot of people sort of catastrophize that if I don't, if I don't hold myself to deadlines, everything's going to fall apart. Well, most of us are really responsible. We care about the people we work with. We know that our bills need to be paid and our family needs to be cared for, all that. So we aren't going to swing so far to the other side, right? But it's a fear of like, well, if I let that go, then everything else will go. Like, probably not. Let's just build up the muscle and shift you into a mindset where you're discerning between, okay, is that a fear-based approach to something versus am I being creative, curious about things? Am I coming up with different solutions? from a clear mind versus, this frantic sort of, the system says I have to do this, or it appears like the system says I have to do this, and therefore I will.
I love what you just said, but I have to say that I know so many people who have operated that way their entire career, and it might be affecting their health or their inability to sleep, or they just are struggling at work because there's just so much going on and they're not able to set the boundary. How do you help somebody who's in that sort of underlying chaotic space be able to take a step back and look at it from a different point of view without criticizing themselves and, basically shooting all over themselves, saying, this is what I should do, or this is what I should not have done? How do you help people? Because I know that there's a ton of people out there who are in that space and say, this all sounds great, but I feel like I'm too far gone.
2 people on my team quit last week. The workload hasn't shifted. We have a deliverable due in 6 weeks. You must hear this.
Yeah, for sure. I've felt it. I've said it myself, right? And I'll say it again, right? It's an ongoing practice, but I think, what you said, Susan, that's great, is how do you step back and look at this, right? And one of the beautiful things about working with a coach or any partner that can distance themselves from the situation a bit, a therapist, all of these great resources we have, is to, sit beside them and say, let's take a look at this situation together, right? It's not about criticizing someone's approach to something. You did the best you could with the tools you had at the moment you made those choices. I am so against wronging someone. What is right and wrong? I don't even know. I could get into a conversation about that because I think it's very nebulous, and it's in, what's right and wrong for yourself, and that's it. And so looking at a situation together in a space of, I'm not here to criticize. I'm here because you're coming to me to say you need something different. Something's not working for you. Let's take a look at what you're doing, and then let's discuss what risks you're willing to take. Ooh. Everything we do is about risk reward, right? So someone might be saying, well, I can't do that because I'm afraid I'm gonna get fired. You might. That I can't say whether that's going to happen or not. I don't know your organization. So what are you willing to do? What steps are you willing to take, right? And this is everything from, some people are like, I'm going to quit. I don't have a job. I can't do this. My health is on the line.
I did that.
Right? That is, wild action to support yourself and what's needed in that moment, right? And I'm guessing that wasn't a rash decision. Oh, I just, one day decided you were going to, swipe your desk clean and walk out. But for others, it's, slowly building up that muscle and the confidence that they can ask for what they want and they can design a life that works for them. So it just depends on the situation.
One thing, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say what you just reminded me. I guess it was last year, I had a client who was struggling with boundaries with her boss and her colleagues. And she was saying that she would get up in the morning, 6 o'clock, and her boss got up earlier than she did and would text her. And she was trying to figure out, okay, I can't be responding to texts, literally pick up my phone in bed, looking and responding to my boss. There's no boundaries there. That means that he can text me whenever. And being willing, like you said, risk versus reward, what we ended up doing was she made a hard line that I will respond at 8 a.m. And she was really worried about it, but she felt like she had to train her boss. And then what happened over time, he never said, how come you didn't respond to my texts? But what he did do was, he didn't text her as early, but it was like she was training him. This was my boundary. I will respond at 8 a.m. But she was scared to death over the thought of actually doing that for herself. But in the end, that risk, it worked out very well for her. But it was her willingness to stand up for herself and say, I can't be on call 24/7 when he needs me over things that aren't urgent.
That's a great example, and at all the first time I've heard that. I had a crazy partner when I was at KPMG 20 years ago who used to email us at 2 a.m. and expected responses. I got taken off a project because I was sleeping. I, like that woman, responded by 8 a.m., which was a reasonable time, and he found that unacceptable. Oh, well.
Yeah. Yeah. And Susan, I have had an experience myself, probably many, but one that sticks out for me, where I kept asking for permission to set a boundary. And it was not explicitly being declined, but it was, and I just kept asking, but you can't do this to me. You can't do this to me. And nothing was happening. And it was actually my therapist who had said, so enough asking, just do it. Right. So great advice. Like sometimes every situation is different. We're humans interacting with each other. We're fluid. We're unpredictable in many ways. Right. So it doesn't mean that works for every situation, but sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm just going to ease in with changing my behavior, and that will change the people around me. Other times we need to be really overt and explicit and have a direct conversation. That works better. Just depends on the situation and for your client to have someone to talk that through with, right? What's going to feel right for me? What choice do I want to make about this that feels like I'm honoring myself and balancing that risk reward as best as I can?
Your intro, when you said we have more power than we think, what's another example of power we might have in the workforce to make it a little bit more manageable for us if we're in a very fast-paced environment or thinly staffed or going through an acquisition or some chaos?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things for me is we don't get what we don't ask for. So if you're in a situation where, and most of us have been there, where, I have too much work and I can't get it all done. So what are some options, right? Think about some options, go to your leaders, talk with your colleagues, figure out how you might be able to distribute that work, and then ask for it, right? I've been surprised a number of times in my career when I've actually recently here's what I would need for this to be worth it for me. And I'm letting you know, but I know you're not going to be able to do it. I literally was like, that's okay. I'm accepting of that. I can't move forward. And my team came back and gave me what I asked for, right? You need to speak what it is that you need. And oftentimes looking for what is my leader? What is this team trying to achieve? And how can we together meet that goal? Right. So leaders definitely are interested in having a conversation where you say, we need to achieve X. Here's how I think we can better achieve that. Right. I can't do it all myself, which ultimately is going to mean things are going to slip, quality is going to dip, something's going to happen. But I've come to you with a solution, a suggestion, some ideas to help you achieve your goals. I mean, what leader doesn't want to engage in that conversation?
That's such a stronger posture than, oh my God, I can't do it all. You got to help me. That is very strong. Also, I have heard about a technique where you look at what's on your plate with your boss and say, okay, all of this can't happen. Prioritize me for me. There are only X number of hours in a day. Which is the high priority to you? How do I allocate my time? And you let the manager who's doing a ton of different things really see what's on your plate and help you figure out what can get done, or what's valuable to get done. Like, what can we move forward? Where do you want me to spend my time? Because the thing that's easier or more interesting to me, or whatever metric you would think, may or may not be what your boss is being measured on or cares most about. There may be some objectives from senior leadership that you weren't privy to. What would you say to people?
Yeah. Years ago, during my very first Agile Scrum implementation, we got leaders into a room every 2 weeks and we did sprint planning. And what was powerful about that, you mentioned it, Catherine, is seeing what's on your plate. It is very different to walk into a conversation and say, I've got these 10 things, and you read them off and they're in the air. But during this Scrum planning process, it was, we've got room for 10 stories. Which 10 would you like? If you want that 11th one, you have to pick one above it.
Falls off.
Right. But the visual part of that. So I think really key to this is actually, put a document together, write it on a whiteboard, whatever that might be, but put it in front of leaders so they can like really, really get that this is all that fits. And yeah, I love that, because so many times we have this, perception of this is what needs to get done, or the 11th and 12th things still need to get done. And I've oftentimes had leaders say, oh my gosh, I wish you would have come to me for help.
Or now I have the information I need to go get budget for a part-time resource or a consultant or a temp or something.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you seeing with your clients? I know you do some executive coaching as well, Susan.
Well, one of the things that, and I love the examples that you gave, but one of the things that I know can be hard for some people is admitting that they need help with anything, whether that, if they're feeling some kind of overwhelm, or they feel a tight deadline and they've got all these things that have to be done at once, raising their hand and saying, I need help with this, is a very scary thing. And instead they just put their head down, they do the thing. Oftentimes it's not their best work because there's just too much going on, and there's this underlying feeling of anxiety. And I'm curious how you, and I see this all the time, I've heard, I can't ask for help. People are going to think that I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm weak, I don't belong here. How do you get people to realize that it's okay, I need help, this is not a weakness, and raise their hand?
That's a big one, I hear. But what do you got, Kristeen?
Yeah, it is big. And, in a performance-driven organization where we're bell curve ranked, and, all of these systems that try and compare us to each other can be really confronting to ask for help. What I would say is, start small. That's an option, right? You don't have to, and you don't have to present it in a way that is, I don't know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Right? Because that's probably not even remotely true. Right. So I think a lot of times when I ask for help, it's here's what I do know, here's some suggestions, here's where, and here's what I need from you. Right. Very different from, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, I can't do this. And then you just hand over a bucket of work to someone else and cry uncle. So there's a way to come into that to say, I do know what I'm doing. You gave me this work because you trust me. No leader gives work to somebody with a thought that, oh, this is probably going to fail. So they gave it to you for a reason. They trust you. Go in, remind yourself that you have successes behind you. And here's what I need from you. And it is our job as leaders to help remove those roadblocks and to help people be successful. And in this current work environment, we can't afford to have more people quitting. So I'd much rather hear about this now than when you say, I just had to call it quits and move to a different organization and start fresh.
Ooh, now that's a compelling reason. Yeah.
Like, I want to know long before your heart has left this job that things are challenging. But if that feels really, really tough for you, find examples in your past where you've asked for help and it's gone well. Remind yourself of those, and then start small. You don't have to ask for everything at once, but just, hey, I need help on this. How did that go? Oh, that went well. Okay, great. And then build up that muscle, because that's how we get confidence, right? We get confidence by doing, not by planning or thinking or talking with someone else about it. We really get it from taking action.
And I always joke, help is a 4-letter word, but not that kind.
Yeah.
I love what you said, how you go in to the meeting or the conversation around request for help in a very empowered state, that you do know what you're doing, that your boss would not have given you this work if he or she didn't think that you could handle it. And coming at it from that point of view, the energy is completely different. You're not in that overwhelmed state. You're in a state of control and you're empowered. So I love the example that you gave.
Yeah, I believe that, you know, we are given a role in an organization, and we have senior leaders, and the whole idea of leading up is about helping my leaders succeed. Doing that in a really, not I'll do anything blindly for you, but I'm genuinely trying to help you succeed. And if that's the case, I need to make sure that my leaders know where there's risk. That risk might reside in me and my workload, but that's my job, is to make sure my boss knows I might not get this done, or I might not hit the quality that's needed. I'm really burning the candle at both ends, and this is, you know, in a dire situation. That's part of my role. My role is not just to purely, you know, in a machine-like way, produce from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. every day.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. When you talk about having people have a healthy relationship to work, is it, you know, sleep hygiene and mental health and nutrition? Like, there's a million ways that we could have a healthier relationship to work. Where do you tend to like to coach?
Yeah, I tend to think about how much of your time is spent in negative emotions versus positive emotions. Now, I don't particularly just prescribe to like anger is negative or anything like that, but in terms of, you know, am I generating a lot of negative emotions, fear, shame, guilt? Like, those feelings largely mean that's not going well, right? We shouldn't feel that way in any relationship over a period of time.
Relationship with my work, I would send my boyfriend packing to the curb, but not gonna my job. Yeah.
It's interesting at times to see how we allow our jobs to treat us, right? And a lot of that is how we allow them to treat us, but it's interesting, right? Because we wouldn't accept that from a good friend, we wouldn't accept it from a partner, you know, that sort of stuff. But so I think about the negative emotions and where are they showing up, you know, what's the story behind them? And that tends to be, you know, a more unhealthy relationship with work. Often with those negative emotions, you are doing the things you mentioned, Catherine, like you're not sleeping well. You're cutting corners on what you eat, if you eat. And I heard someone tell me once, this is the second day in a row that I've had a lollipop for lunch. Okay, I bet your brain is high functioning. Like, this isn't good for your work hours or your personal life.
I thought you were going to say I missed my morning workout or something. No, that's way worse.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that's a common thing too. Why don't you go to the gym? Well, when would I go? I'm always working. That's a problem, right? So you start to see those things show up when you're canceling, you know, personal plans, you're missing big events with your family and friends, you're working during vacation, you know, all of your conversation is around work.
Okay,
right?
I have a problem with that. My conversation is definitely about work.
I will say though, if your conversations are around work, mostly, like, it's not bad if the conversation is in a really empowered, positive place. Like, ooh, Catherine, you know, when we go to dinner tonight,
I launched this podcast. I'm so excited.
Right. That is life-giving, right? It's when, you know, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me yesterday. I was given another project, and that energy is like, okay, something needs to shift, right? And then on the other side of it, when we have, you know, the positive emotions, curiosity, empathy, we're able to make the trade-off, right? We're saying,
joy, flow.
Yeah, I know I've got a deadline and this is my job. I'm going to shut my laptop and I will resume tomorrow, right? I'm going to renegotiate a deadline. I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to whatever. Like, so I focus on that. And that's usually a great indicator. Most people know if they have an unhealthy relationship with work. They may not call it that, but they know. They're coming to me, they're speaking out, they're telling their friends, their family knows. that it's, it's heavy, it's draining, it doesn't feel light and bright. Right?
It's a good indicator. I'm always having people look is how does that feel? Oh, it feels heavy. Okay, but we need to work on that.
Yeah, all of a sudden I tense up. All of a sudden my stomach starts moving. Okay, that's probably an indicator that we should look there and see what needs to shift.
And I would add that not only looking to see how the work needs to shift potentially, but how we are interacting with our colleagues, our bosses in those moments. Listening to what you just said, I'm reminded of a story that a friend had told me that she was on this was before COVID, and she was on deadline for something and her brain was really fried. It was like 6:30 at night. She's still sitting at her desk. She promised her boss that she would have this thing to him, by midnight. And she reached out to him and said, I just want to go to the gym. I need to clear my head. I promise you, I will still get this done. And he's like, totally fine. And she said, you would think that even though I was on deadline, I was taking time away from getting the work done. She said, after I gave myself permission, I gave myself what I needed, which was just a nice hard run on the treadmill. She said, I had more clarity around what I needed to do. I was in a better frame of mind. I got the work done and it took less time than I could have imagined. And he was thrilled with it.
Yeah, and the work product was probably better.
Right, but a lot of us are like, well, I don't have time. I don't have time to go to the gym or go for a walk or call the friend or do whatever it is that we need to do to take a step away and fill ourselves up so that we can do a better job at our job. Yeah. We don't think of that. It's not the first thing. What do I need to do here for myself so that I can be in that positive emotional state that you were talking about?
A lot of the work I do with clients is getting them out of their head and into their bodies, right? That's great. There's new information we're always getting, but the wisdom's really below that, right? That's where the powerful work comes in and our wiser self shows up and says, here's the answer to that, right? Here's the risk reward trade-off that you should make, right? It helps you with those tough things. But yeah, just dropping into that and knowing and trusting that if you quiet enough, the answers will emerge.
I always play this joke about us. It's a little bit. 4 people can do the job. Who do you pick? The one you like. Why do you like them? Don't know. They asked a good question, cool glasses, seem enthusiastic, would be easy to manage. And then the brain scrambles to say, and they went to Brown and they used to work for one of our competitors. But that's not the reason they were hired. It was a gut decision. They hired the one they liked.
Yeah. Yeah. And your gut contains all of that, right? It took into account all of that. Right?
It was fast. The right decision is the fast one. I know you have a lot of stuff around this, Susan. What would you add to that?
Well, I was just thinking about how when you were talking about, there's a lot of chaos going on and being able to take a step back. Often when you take a step back, and regardless of what it could mean for you, whether that's exercise, whether that's just going out for a walk, whether that's go sitting in nature or meditating, often the answers come. We know what we need to do when you're doing something completely different. So it's like what you said earlier, Kristeen, that the answer isn't going to come if you're staring at that presentation longer. The answer is going to come when you take a step away and you say, I'm going to go read a book that I really love, a fiction novel. I'm going to read it. And while you're reading it, it's like, boom, and there it comes in. And we don't give ourselves enough of that time to be creative, to find the answers, to ask ourselves, what is the right next step? Because so many of us are just stuck in all of the doing instead of taking a step back and going, okay, what resonates with me? What feels right for me? What really makes my stomach just go in knots? and listen to what our body is willing to tell us in those moments, instead of just looking for all of these other things. I think we just need to be willing to trust our gut more and take ourselves out of situations so we can have more of the 70,000-foot view of what's the right next step, what do I need to do for myself in this moment, and then give ourselves permission to actually do what our body and our mind is telling us we need to do.
Exactly, because we get on that hamster wheel where they're like busy, doing. Because when people come to me, something's imploded, they've quit, they've gotten laid off, somebody died, something happened, and that's all they can see. They're mean like, what? I don't have to do this? What? I could actually take a month off? What? I could actually like go away on a vacation? What? Woman came to me, she started this new job, she was really excited, company got reorged and she got reorged out. Okay. And I said, why don't you just go to Europe for a month? And she goes, funny you should say that. I booked some tickets because that was the right decision. Like she could, her kids were out of school and she could afford to do this. And that was her right decision. But the woman I worked with previously to get her into that job would never have considered that an option. Oh, no, I have to be working. I have to be making this much money. I have to be, it has to be this step up into this industry and this type of role with this executive team. And she's like, nah, I'm going to Europe for a month, then I'm going to come back and I'll find the right thing.
Yeah. One of the big resistors to that, space and quiet is, then I have to feel things.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
yep.
She went there.
So because I experienced that myself. If I just keep doing, then I don't have to address any of the things going on inside me. That is uncomfortable. It's gonna, my intuition is gonna give me information about a choice I should make that's going to move me into a place of discomfort, because it is a wiser self wanting to change the trajectory. And so that's unfamiliar and uncomfortable. And so if I just keep doing the same thing, even if that brings about a negative result, it's familiar. So I'll go back to the familiar, even if it's hard, because I know it. And it's just a tendency.
Okay, so the chronic overworker in one company is tired of overworking, goes into a new company, and their habit is overworking. And then they come to you and say, I'm doing the same thing in this new company.
Yeah, great. So then I'm probably leaning more towards bigger action. So Susan, we talked about, we could step into some change and ease our way in. If it's the beginning of a relationship, I advocate for bigger moves. This is the time to set the foundation with the new relationships you're building. Don't start working 10-hour days. Like, no, you go to whatever feels right for you. And that is individualized. So whatever is the right number for you. So if I'm going to work no more than 8 or 9 hours a day, great. But you set that boundary right away. So we try and adjust that, immediately. And then talk about who is it that you want to be in this new season. Get really clear on who that is. What other parts of your life do you want to experience that you set aside in that past season, right? And that you were dreaming about, which is why you went for this new job, because you were going to finally, train for that half marathon or spend time with your kids in the morning before they went to school or whatever that is. Like, don't let go of that dream. Know that and trust that you can have all of that. Sometimes we don't even believe we have a right to ask for it, or, who do I think I am to be able to do all of these things?
Or it even could be possible.
Right. Especially if we don't see it modeled, right? If we don't see that represented somewhere in our lives, right? If I'm looking around, I'm like, well, Susan, you are working crazy hours, so that's how you get ahead. I see you do it. That must be the way. I don't see anyone who is, able to do the family thing or have a side gig and a corporate job or a beautiful hobby that has them traveling around the world. Like, if I don't see that, I don't know what's possible.
Well, it's like what you said earlier. It's having the curious mindset. because it does exist and you can create it, but you have to be willing to, ask yourself the question, okay, where am I holding myself back from actually creating this for myself? Like you said earlier, it's hard for us to feel, to get those signals that you may not be happy in the job that you're in. And it's very scary at the possibility of leaving and going somewhere else. But because you're familiar with the pain and that the negative emotions and the possibly dysfunctional dynamic that you have at work, you tend to stay there. As uncomfortable as you are there, it's more scary and uncomfortable to actually make the leap and make the change. But if you say to yourself, you know what, I want to design my life in this way. I want to have this kind of work-life balance, or I want to have this kind of a relationship with work, this kind of relationship with my family, and saying, okay, I know this is possible. How do I do that? Versus just because you don't see it, you're saying, well, it's not possible because I look around and nobody has it. That doesn't mean it's true. But if you're curious and look at it and go, okay, this has to be true, and I'm going to figure out why. And all of a sudden, you're going to start to see things in a different way that you didn't see before, with that very closed mindset. This is always the way I've been, versus, okay, I can change this.
Yeah. You get me thinking about, like, be an innovator in your own life, right? Like, how do you innovate your own life? Like, we do it with other people's goals. So at work, somebody gives me, you must, deliver this thing. And I'm crazy innovative. I'm finding answers. I'm asking for help. I'm researching companies that can come in and consult. And then in my own life, I'm like, no,
Not possible.
this is the only option there is. I'm, that's it. And how do you get, innovative and creative and trust that there's an infinite number of ways to live, to experience this. So yeah, poke around, look for it, scavenger hunt.
Okay, that's gorgeous.
And I was going to say, and make the choice that it is possible.
Yeah.
How to innovate your own life. Kristeen Barth, thank you so much for joining us today. This was super fun. Where do people learn more about you and your coaching?
Yeah, I do a lot on LinkedIn, so you can follow me out there. That's a great place. My website, KristeenBarth.com. Yeah, those are the two best places to catch me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today.
Thank you for having me.